The Duke of Blackmere gave his new bride a crumbling Yorkshire castle and rode away without looking back. He thought he was done with her. He had never been more wrong in his life. Because there is a particular kind of woman, quiet, overlooked, the kind men walk past without seeing, who does not break when she is abandoned in the dark. She builds a fire, and then she builds everything else. And when the man who left her finally comes back, broken, empty, with nowhere else to go, he finds that the grave he left her in has become something he does not recognize, something warm, something alive, something that is entirely, completely, and irrevocably hers. The carriage stopped at the Blackmere Gatehouse on a gray November afternoon in 1851, and Violet Ashbourne, née Marchmont, Duchess of Blackmere for exactly 4 days, opened the door herself because no footman came. She stepped into mud past her ankle. She looked up at her inheritance. 3 days earlier, she had sat in a Lincoln's Inn Fields solicitor's office, while 2 men negotiated over her head, her father's debts, her grandmother's dowry. A duke who needed money with the urgency of a man who had been pretending for 2 years that he did not. Cornelius Ashbourne had glanced at her once during the signing. His eyes were the flat, functional gray of Sheffield steel. She was a column in his ledger. He entered her into his accounts and looked away. The wedding had lasted 23 minutes, she had counted. At the church steps in the November drizzle, he had delivered 4 sentences. Blackmere Castle in North Yorkshire is yours to manage. The quarterly allowance arrives from my solicitor. Do not expect correspondence. Do not expect visits. He had walked to his carriage. The London fog had taken him. Now she stood in the mud of his abandoned courtyard and looked up at 4 uneven towers strangled by dead ivy, warped doors hanging on broken hinges. Not a single candle in any window. No footman. No housekeeper, no welcome of any kind. A figure shuffled from the doorway, thin, elderly. A coat mended so many times the original garment was a philosophical question. Barrow, he said, caretaker. Weren't expecting anyone. Duke's man wrote to say the place would stand empty another year. The Duke's man was not informed of recent developments, Violet said. I am the Duchess of Blackmere. Show me my rooms. Her bedchamber was a vast drafty cavern, bare mattress, cold fireplace, a window the wind entered through with the confidence of something that owned the place. Barrow set a candle on the table. I'll fetch coal if the rats ain't got to it. He shuffled out. Violet stood in the center of the room, 22 years old, alone in a ruin on the Yorkshire moors. A title worth nothing up here. A husband who had already filed her underclothed. She sat on the bare mattress and felt the full weight of it. The loneliness, the humiliation. The cold fury of a woman who has been treated as a transaction. She sat with it for exactly 10 minutes. Then she stood up. She found old newspaper under the grate, pulled 3 pieces of wood from a broken section of wainscoting in the corridor, had a small, smoky, imperfect fire burning before Barrow returned with his coal. She looked at it and made a private, quiet decision that would change everything. This place will not bury me. I will bury it first and build something in the hole. She did not know, sitting in that cold room on that first night, that 3 years later the man who had abandoned her would come back to this castle, broken, with nowhere else to go, and find it completely unrecognizable. She did not know that when he walked through the gatehouse arch, he would stop and stare at what she had built and feel, for the first time, something he could not name. She did not know any of that yet. She only knew the fire was burning, and that was enough to start. Winter hit Blackmere like a declaration, absolute, without apology. By her second week, Violet had abandoned every dress she had packed, beautiful, useless things. She raided the attic rooms, rough woolen blankets, old clothing, a large sheepskin coat belonging to some long-ago caretaker that still had most of its warmth. She wore it without a moment's concern for what a duchess was supposed to look like. The Duchess of Blackmere was supposed to survive. Everything else was secondary. On the 12th day, a man arrived smelling of gin and roasted pork, carrying a ledger too thin for 3 years of honest estate management. Mr. Sedley, estate agent. The smile of a man who has been stealing from an absent owner for years and would very much like to continue. Violet opened the ledger. She knew what honest books looked like. She had watched her father's accounts be managed, first competently, then catastrophically, and she had learned in the way of intelligent people who are not permitted to participate, by watching everything and being underestimated. Sedley's books had been enthusiastically dishonest. Rents at half their value, repairs paid for that had never taken place. A North Tower roof repair, £42 October last year for a roof she had personally placed buckets under 2 nights ago. The North Tower repair, she said, £42 October last year. The weather, your grace, has a hole through which I can see the stars, she said. I saw them at 2 in the morning when the dripping woke me. Sedley's smile died. "You are dismissed," Violet said. "Leave all ledgers on the table by noon tomorrow. Collect a single penny from the tenants before you go, and I will write to the Duke's solicitors tonight, recommending criminal proceedings." He blustered. She was merely, "I am the Duchess of Blackmere," she said, standing, covered in soot, hair tied with twine, eyes that had stopped accepting the idea that she could be dismissed. "And Blackmere is mine. Get out of it." He got out. What followed was 18 months of work that left her hands calloused, her back permanently acquainted with a dull ache, and her understanding of the world fundamentally, irrevocably changed. She hired Agnes Thwaite, the blacksmith's daughter, with arms like a stevedore and a magnificent contempt for any task that dared to be difficult. Edmund Briggs, a one-handed Crimean veteran who could mend anything from a slate roof to a foundation beam with the patient focus of a man who has run out of things to prove. Hartley, a quiet, competent steward, more interested in doing things correctly than appearing impressive. She worked beside all of them, on her knees scrubbing flags, hauling rubble, learning the weight of a coal scuttle up 3 flights of stairs, learning to push through the cold that settled into her joints at the end of each day, because the work did not stop because her body had registered an objection. The tenants watched her. They watched her calloused hands. They watched what she did when a tenant roof failed, sent Edmund immediately, paid herself. They watched what she did when a child was born too early, and the physician's fee was beyond the family. Rode to the village at midnight with the only money she had. Respect in Yorkshire is not given. It is observed, accumulated, and eventually, grudgingly, honestly, acknowledged. By the end of her second year, Blackmere smelled of beeswax and applewood smoke. The roofs were sound. The fireplaces drew properly. The flagstones glowed warm amber. Violet had changed too. The pale, silent girl from the solicitor's office was gone. In her place was something the Moors had made, a woman with calloused hands, a grounded, solid stance, and the deep, private satisfaction of someone who has built something real where they were given a grave. She stopped looking at the road south. She rarely thought of Cornelius. When she did, it was without pain. A dull, fading resentment, like a bruise in its last stage. She did not miss him. She had something better. Blackmere, entirely hers, answerable to no one. On a bright October morning of her third year, standing in the kitchen garden watching the autumn cabbages being harvested, she realized she was happy. Not performed happiness. Not gritted teeth contentment. A real, solid, earned happiness. The happiness of a life that fits the person living it. She stood in the garden and felt it. 4 days later, Cornelius rode through the gatehouse arch. She was in the kitchen when Barrow found her, sleeves rolled to the elbow, flour on her cheekbone, arguing cheerfully with Agnes about whether rosemary improved or ruined a savory loaf. A Tuesday. Ordinary. Exactly what Tuesdays at Blackmere had become. Rider in the yard, Barrow said. His face was carefully neutral. Single rider. Quality horse. She heard Samson, the rough-coated lurcher from a failing farm, let out the specific bark he reserved for strangers he had not decided about yet. She walked through the great hall, bright, warm, smelling of applewood smoke and beeswax, and opened the front door. He was in the courtyard. He had dismounted and stood with his reins in his gloved hand, looking at the castle. He had left a ruin. What he was looking at was not a ruin. Dead ivy gone. Climbing roses on the south face, their red hips glowing against dark stone. Both great doors hanging level and true. Courtyard flagstones set and swept. He looked at all of it with the expression of a man arriving somewhere that has continued existing without him and done it considerably better than he expected. Then he looked at her. She stood on the top step in a plain wool dress of deep blue, flour on her face, hair honest about the fact that she had been occupied when he arrived. Not a single element of her appearance arranged for this moment. The silence in the courtyard held only wind and the horse's quiet breathing. "You're here," she said. "Not a welcome. A fact." "Yes. Why?" He looked toward the valley. His jaw was tighter than she remembered, and there was something new on the left side of his face, a scar running from below his ear to the line of his chin, pale and still slightly puckered. Recent. Violent. "London is no longer possible for me," he said. "There were circumstances, political, financial." A long pause. "I needed to come home." The word home landed in the courtyard between them. Surrounded by 3 years of her labor and his silence, she felt no flutter, no welcoming rush. She felt something sharper, terrorial. The specific anger of someone who has built something precious being told it was always someone else's. "East Wing guest chamber," she said, "not the master suite. Wipe your boots before you come inside." She turned and walked back into her castle. He stood in the courtyard for a moment, looking at the door she had walked through. Then he wiped his boots and followed. Breakfast the next morning. Violet at the head of the long oak table. Her seat, every morning, correspondence and tea. Cornelius appeared in yesterday's crumpled clothes, hair uncombed, looking like a man who had slept badly in an unfamiliar room. He pulled out a chair midway down the table. The scrape of the wood against stone sounded like a trespass. Agnes entered with bacon. She froze. Her eyes went immediately, not to the Duke, not to the title, but to Violet. The plate suspended in the air, awaiting instruction. 1 second. Barely a moment. But it hit Cornelius with the force of a physical blow. The servant did not look to the title. She looked to the woman who had kept them all from freezing. Authority here was not inherited. It was earned, and everyone in this building knew exactly who had earned it. Cornelius looked at the table. "Is there coffee?" he asked. "We do not keep coffee," Violet said. "Expensive to ship from York. Spoils in the damp. There is tea." He wrapped cold hands around the cup, dark as mud, strong as an argument. "You have managed well," he said, looking around the room. "The castle." It's a home," Violet said, an edge entering her voice. "Habitable is what you leave a tenant. A home is what you bleed for." She stood. "I have accounts to settle with Hartley. Do not interfere with the staff. They have actual work to do." She swept out. He sat alone at a table that felt miles long, drinking bitter tea in a house that had thoroughly forgotten him. And somewhere in the East Wing corridor, walking away from the breakfast room, Violet Ashbourne pressed her back against the cold stone wall, closed her eyes, and for the first time in 3 years felt the full dangerous weight of a feeling she had buried so deep she had almost believed it dead. She pushed off the wall. She went to find Hartley. She had accounts to settle. On the 5th day, seeking warmth, Cornelius found the library, her library. His grandfather's massive mahogany desk buried under ledgers, maps, and correspondence. The air smelled of iron gall ink and honest work. He looked at the open ledger on the desk. Left side, Sedley's cramped, greasy falsifications. Right side, Violet's handwriting in the margins, pressing so hard into the paper it left physical grooves. Sedley lies. South Tower masonry never executed. He turned the page. December, 3 sheep dead of cold. Sold landscape paintings from the green drawing room to purchase wool for tenant blankets. He turned again. February, fever in the village. Sold the Blackmere garnets to pay the physician from Leeds. He stopped breathing. The garnets had been his mother's. He turned more pages. His hands moved with increasing urgency. Sold the silver candelabras. French manufacture 1743 wedding gift to cover winter wheat deficit after Sedley's theft discovered. He pressed both hands flat on the closed ledger. She had not just cleaned the castle. She had dismantled his legacy piece by piece, traded 3 centuries of Blackmere history for mortar and medicine and grain to keep alive a place he had abandoned without a backward glance. Looking for something, he turned. Violet stood in the doorway, faded blue apron, hands dusted with soot. "You sold the garnets," he said. His voice came out rough. "The candelabras. Those belonged to a Duchess of Blackmere who was starving in a freezing castle," she said, walking into the room. She stood in front of him, smaller than him, taking up the entire room, because her husband left her with a thieving steward and a depleted allowance.
"That was my family's heritage."
"I couldn't feed the tenants with a candelabra," she said, her voice dropping to the quiet register she used when she meant something completely. "I couldn't patch the roof with garnets. So I traded your dead ancestors' vanity to keep your living tenants from freezing in the dirt." She closed the distance between them. "You left me a graveyard, Cornelius. I had to sell the tombstones to buy shovels. Do not come into my house and lecture me on heritage." He stared at her. The anger dissolved, replaced by something hollow and sickening. She was right, every word, and he had no answer for any of it. He stepped back. His hand moved, automatically, to the scar along his jaw. Her eyes followed the movement. "What happened to your face?" she asked. The question escaped before her pride could catch it. He dropped his hand. "I backed a position on the Corn Laws my party did not expect me to hold," he said. His voice had lost every trace of its aristocratic polish. "I held it because I believed it was correct. My allies withdrew, my creditors called in their obligations. The Kent estate is gone. The London house is gone." He looked at the ceiling. "When I refused to change my vote, 3 men with something blunt met me in an alley behind St. James's." His jaw tightened. "I had nothing left. No money, no allies, no property. I had nowhere else to go." Violet looked at him. The Duke of Blackmere was completely gone. What stood in front of her was a broken man, beaten out of his own life, seeking refuge in the very place he had condemned her to. She felt something she did not want to feel. Empathy, arriving like an uninvited guest. Sitting down without being asked, she turned away from it, picked up her ledger, snapped it shut. "We are out of lamp oil," she said. "Use candles sparingly tonight." She walked out, but in the corridor outside the library door, she stopped. She stood with one hand against the cold stone wall, The ledger pressed to her chest, and she stared at the floor for a long moment. 3 years she had not cried. Not once. She had decided, in that first cold room, that tears were a luxury she could not afford. And she had kept to that decision with the same discipline she had kept to everything else. She stood in the corridor, and she did not cry. But it was close, closer than it had been in 3 years. She pushed off the wall and kept walking. The true cold came in the 3rd week of November. Not the damp Yorkshire chill she knew. Something Arctic, descending in a single night, making the air itself brittle. The castle stones seemed to groan under the weight of it. At 2:30 in the morning, a sound like a rifle shot came from directly below. Violet was out of bed before the echo finished. She knew the sound, had feared it since the first winter. The iron pipes through the deep cellars, medieval, original, long overdue for replacement, waiting only for money that had never quite stretched, down the stairs, through the great hall, down into the cellars. The smell hit her first. Iron rust and ancient water and catastrophic cold. The eastern cellar, 3 years of preserved winter food, was filling with black water, already past her ankle, rising fast. In the far corner, a burst pipe was sending a geyser of freezing water at the vaulted ceiling. The shutoff valve was directly in the path of the spray. She went. The cold of the water hit her legs like burning needles. Her boots filled immediately. Her cloak dragged her downward. She fought through the rising flood, lantern high, reached the pipe. The spray hit her full in the chest and face. She found the shutoff wheel with both hands. It did not move. She planted her feet on the submerged stone floor, braced her shoulders, and pulled with everything she had. The iron tore at her palms. She felt the skin go. Blood washed away in the freezing spray. She pulled again. Her muscles shook violently. Her jaw ached from clenching. Nothing. Rusted solid. A heavy body crashed into the water beside her. Cornelius, Treasure's boots, nothing above the waist. The cold hit his bare skin, and she saw the full body contraction of it, every muscle responding simultaneously to the shock of it. He did not look at her. His eyes went straight to the wheel. "Rusted shut," she shouted over the roar. "I cannot turn it." He put his hands on the wheel beside hers. Pulled. A low groan tore from his chest. The wheel moved a fraction of an inch. A horrible metallic screech. He looked at her directly, water streaming down both their faces. "Hands over mine. Everything you have. On 3. No room for titles. No room for resentment. Not in freezing black water with 3 years of winter food at risk, and the foundations of the castle groaning above them." She slapped her bleeding hands over his. Felt the tendons in his knuckles. The frantic beat of his pulse beneath freezing skin. 3. They heaved. The sound that came from Cornelius was raw and fundamental. The sound of a body giving absolutely everything it has. Violet threw her full weight backward, her boots slipping on the slimy floor stones. With a crack that rang off the vaulted ceiling, the rust seal broke. The wheel turned. Half a turn, a full turn. The geyser dropped to a stream. Another turn, a trickle, a fifth, silence. They stood in knee-deep water in a cellar below, freezing, chest heaving. The only sounds their ragged breathing, and the gentle, terrible lapping of the flood against the stone walls. Her hands were still resting over his on the wheel. She could feel his pulse. She let go. In the kitchen, the stoves were still warm. Cornelius moved before she could direct him. Found blankets. Found linen towels. He dropped to his knees in front of her on the kitchen floor and pulled off her soaked boots and began rubbing her feet with a dry towel, forcing blood back into the numbed limbs. She looked down at the top of his dark head. He was shivering too, bare skin covered in goose flesh, water dripping from his jaw onto the flagstones. His knuckles were scraped and bleeding from the rusted iron. He looked up. His gray eyes were completely stripped. No title, no armor, no performance, nothing inherited or assumed or performed. Just a man with bleeding hands and an expression that was entirely uncomplicatedly sorry. The fortress she had spent 3 years building. Mortar mixed with anger, gates reinforced with justified resentment, cracked, not open. Just a hairline fracture, but enough to let the heat in. "I'm fine," she said, pulling her feet back. Her voice was not as steady as she wanted it to be. He did not argue. He stood, wrapped a blanket around his own shoulders, sat on the bench beside her, not close, just near enough that the warmth was mutual. They sat watching the fire eat the birchwood until the shivering finally, slowly, stopped. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. And in the silence of that kitchen, something that had been frozen for 3 years began, very quietly, very carefully, to thaw. The morning after the pipe, Violet was at her desk, staring at a letter from the Harrogate magistrate that had been ruining her evenings for 6 weeks. Cornelius appeared in the doorway. "Davies," he said, reading the name from across the room. "He's contesting the Blackwood timber concession. He wants a bribe," Violet said. "He knows I cannot afford a legal challenge. He simply keeps writing until I pay or lose the concession by default." She rubbed her bandaged temples. Without that timber sale, the spring planting is not covered. May I? He looked at the quill beside the inkstand, not reaching for it, asking. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she placed the letter in front of him. He sat, picked up the quill, and the man who had fumbled a pitchfork and failed at firewood disappeared entirely. In his place, something sharp, focused, and genuinely formidable. A man in his correct territory for the first time since his arrival. His pen moved with the assurance of someone who knows exactly what they are doing and why. 12 minutes. He pushed the paper toward her. She read it. 3 pieces of legislation she had not known existed. A courtesy that managed to be simultaneously perfectly civil and absolutely devastating. A quiet note that the magistrate's recent assessments might benefit from external review, and that the Duke of Blackmere, as a former member of the Peers Select Committee on Land Revenue, would be delighted to facilitate such a review should the timber question prove difficult to resolve promptly. A blade wrapped in velvet. Send that, he said quietly. Your loggers will have the concession by Friday. The relief that moved through her, untying a knot she had carried for 6 weeks, was immediate, profound, and annoying in its intensity. Thank you, she said. The words came with more difficulty than she would have liked. He looked at the fire. It is considerably less than you are owed. She looked at him, at the letter, at his hand still holding the quill. She thought, a man who knows what he owes and says so plainly. She filed it, said nothing, went back to her accounts, but she thought about it for the rest of the day. The black London town coach came up the Valley Road on a December Tuesday with no crest on the door. Violet was in the courtyard with Hartley when it came through the arch. Sampson appeared at her side, silent, hackles high. A man stepped out, beaver fur collar, London boots immediately ruined by the snow. 2 large men behind him with the flat, empty eyes of professional intimidation. His gaze settled on Violet, sheepskin coat, braided hair, salt sack at her feet. You there, he said. Fetch the master of the house. Carmichael, from London. I am the Duchess of Blackmere, Violet said. State your business to me. He produced a document case. I hold promissory notes signed by the Duke. £38,000 outstanding. We have come to collect against the estate assets, livestock, revenues, and the deed to this property. £38,000. The number hit the courtyard like a stone dropped into still water. The castle door opened. Cornelius came down the steps. He saw Carmichael. She watched his face move through recognition and then through the specific fear of a man who has been found by the thing he ran from. His hand twitched toward the scar on his jaw. Carmichael, he said. Hollow, your grace. A smile without warmth. Found your hiding place. Miserable pile of stones, but the lead on the roof will fetch something when we strip it. Cornelius descended slowly. He placed himself between Violet and the men. The estate is entailed. You cannot seize. We can seize the revenues, the livestock. Carmichael shrugged. Or you come back to London and face the magistrate. The Fleet prison is quite cold this time of year. Cornelius closed his eyes. He had run as far as the map would allow. His failures had caught him anyway. He turned his head and looked at Violet. His eyes held something she had not seen from him before. Not apology. Something worse and more honest than apology. The look of a man who has understood, fully, finally, completely, what his choices have cost. I'll go with them, he said quietly. Leave the castle alone. Leave her alone. He turned toward the steps. Stop! Violet's voice cracked across the courtyard like a whip. She walked past him, stopped 2 feet from Carmichael. The smell of his cigar smoke was nauseating. You will not take a single sheep, a single bale of hay, or a single shilling from this estate, she said, completely, dangerously quiet. Carmichael sighed. I have the law. Under the estate management agreement registered with the county court in Harrogate, Violet said, all revenues and assets of Blackmere fall under irrevocable ducal trust for the sole management of the Duchess during any period of the Duke's absence. The Duke has now returned and established residency. Any seizure during the residency re-establishment period constitutes unlawful interference with a protected landed estate. 70% invention. 30% real legal language from the management agreement Hartley had drawn up 18 months ago for entirely different reasons. She did not break eye contact for a single second. I have a solicitor in York, she said. He is very thorough. He genuinely enjoys this kind of work. Carmichael took a step forward, his height intended as a threat. A sound from above. Everyone looked up. Barrow stood on the stone balcony with the long sporting rifle from above the kitchen fireplace resting on the sill. His face contained no expression whatsoever. The face of a man who has been cold before and is not particularly concerned about being cold again. Beside Violet, Sampson stepped forward, not barking, simply standing, all his height, All his silence, his yellow eyes fixed on Carmichael with the stillness of a dog who has already made his decision and is simply waiting for events to confirm it. Carmichael looked at the dog. He looked at the rifle. He looked at Violet. He walked back to his carriage with the careful dignity of a man trying not to appear as though he is retreating, while retreating comprehensively. The coach skidded back down the icy road. Gone. Violet stood in the courtyard until the sound of wheels disappeared entirely. Then she breathed. Her hands were shaking. She put them in her pockets. She turned. Cornelius was on the steps looking at her as though she had just done something he did not have adequate language for. "The residency re-establishment period," he said quietly, "is not a real legal concept," she said. A breath escaped him, half laugh, half something else entirely. He ran a hand through his wet hair. "You bluffed 38,000 pounds of London muscle with an invented legal precedent. Barrow is an excellent shot," she said. "And Samson hates cigar smoke." She turned toward the door. "Come inside," she said. "It's cold." He followed her in, and for the first time since his arrival, the word inside felt like it included him. That evening, the storm broke. The sky cleared to a sharp transparent purple. The air inside Blackmere smelled of applewood smoke and the particular quality of a world that has been through something difficult and come out the other side. Violet sat in the library with a glass of harsh cider. Her bandaged hands throbbed. The adrenaline from the courtyard was long gone. What remained was the specific, bone-deep exhaustion of a woman who has been holding everything together for a very long time and has just, for one moment, felt the full weight of that. She sat with it. She did not push it away. The door opened quietly. Cornelius came in. He carried his small personal ledger, battered, the leather cracked at the spine. He set it on the desk. He covered her bandaged hand with his. His skin was warm. New calluses just beginning to form over the old softness. From the iron wheel, from the firewood, from weeks of trying in a place that had taught him, slowly, that trying was not optional. He did not look away from her face. "I cannot undo the church steps," he said. "No polish, no performance. Just the plain, costly truth. I cannot give you back 3 years. The arithmetic is permanent. I know that." A pause. "I am bankrupt, politically finished. I have a ruined face and the full knowledge that I handled this. Handled you. With a dishonor I will spend a long time living with." She looked at their hands. "But I know property law," he said. "I know how to handle men like Carmichael and Davies. I know how to use a pen the way you use a hammer, with precision and without mercy." He swallowed. "This is your castle, Violet. You bled for the mortar. I do not want to take it from you. I want to work for it, beside you, if you will allow it." The silence stretched. This was the moment the story would prescribe a rush of warmth, a dissolving of the past in a single generous gesture. But Violet had been built by the North. She understood that spring does not arrive in one day of sunshine. It comes in weeks of mud and frost and slow, agonizing, patient thawing. Trust was not a gift. It was masonry, laid slowly, tested before the next course was set. She slowly slid her hand from under his. His jaw tightened. A genuine grief moved through his face, unguarded, unperformed, completely real. He began to step back. "The East Barn," she said. He stopped. "Needs a new roof before February. The slate merchants in Leeds overcharge on shipping." She opened his ledger to a blank page. "If you can negotiate a better rate by Friday." She looked up. "I will consider moving you out of the East Wing." He stared at her. The grief on his face broke apart. Something new came through it. Not quite a smile yet, but the architecture of one, the foundation of one, beginning to be built. "The slate merchants," he said quietly. "Consider them managed by dawn." "Good." She stood, walked to the fireplace, held out the iron poker. "Now come here. I am going to teach you to bank a fire properly. You have been doing it wrong for 3 weeks, and it is wasting wood." He came to stand beside her. She showed him how to arrange the coals so the heat lasted through the night. He watched with the focused, genuine attention of a man who has decided that whatever he is being taught, he will learn it correctly this time. "Like that," she said. "Like that," he said. Outside, the storm was entirely gone. The moor lay still and cold and clear under the most honest sky in England, bright with stars that had been there long before any of this and would be there long after. Inside, the fire burned steady and long. The following October, Blackmere Castle stood on its limestone crag under an autumn sky, the deep transparent blue of cold glass. The climbing roses on the south face held their red hips against the dark stone. The kitchen garden was in its harvest state. The sounds rising from the valley were the sounds of a working estate in genuine, lasting good order. Violet was in the walled garden checking the espaliered pear tree she had planted in her second spring. 3 years to establish. Now finally, fruiting properly. She touched one of the pears with the same unconscious automatic tenderness she brought to all things, checking its weight, its readiness, its honest quality. She heard his footstep on the garden path before she saw him. She knew it by now, the slight heaviness on the left foot, the purposeful, unhurried pace of a man who has learned that arriving matters less than arriving correctly. Cornelius came through the garden gate with a letter. Carmichael's legal challenge, he said. Dismissed. The promissory notes ruled irregular on procedural grounds. 6 months of methodical, patient work. Every parliamentary contact remaining to him, every piece of legal knowledge he had spent 12 years accumulating. Every weapon left in his possession, used with the focused precision of a man who has decided that what he has is sufficient if used honestly. It is finished. She took the letter, read it, folded it, put it in her apron pocket. Good, she said. He came to stand beside her looking at the pear tree. 3 years to trust the soil, she said. He was quiet in the particular way she had learned. The gathering of himself before he said something he intended to say honestly and completely. I know I cannot clear the old debt, he said. I know a year of usefulness does not balance 3 years of absence. He turned to look at her directly. I am asking only if there is a forward ledger, a new account, starting from now, from what we actually have, without requiring the old balance to be settled first before anything new can be entered. She thought about accounts, about the way she had always managed Blackmere's books, not by refusing to acknowledge the debts, but by building the income side with such patience and consistency that it eventually, honestly, outweighed them. Not erasure, outpacing. There is a forward ledger, she said. He looked at her. You are in it, she said. You have been for some time. He reached out and took her hand. The calloused, strong, honest hand that had turned a rusted iron wheel in freezing black water and signed 100 estate documents and planted a pear tree that took 3 years to bear fruit and tended it without complaint through every one of those years. He held it carefully, like something worth holding. Thank you, he said. She left her hand where it was. Don't make me regret the accounting, she said. I will spend considerable effort ensuring you don't, he said. Above them, the October sky was the blue of deep water. The valley carried its sounds of honest work. The castle on its crag was warm with fires and beeswax and the quiet, steady life of a home built stone by stone, day by day, season by season, by a woman who had been handed a grave and had refused, with every calloused, bleeding, determined inch of herself, to lie down in it. It was hers. It was also now theirs. These were not incompatible things. They never had been. The Duke of Blackmere gave his bride a crumbling castle and rode away without looking back. He thought he was done with her. He was wrong because he had never actually looked at her. And the people we dismiss without truly seeing are frequently the ones who outlast everything we thought we were building. Violet did not survive her abandonment because she was extraordinary. She survived it because she made a decision, in a cold room, on a bare mattress, on her first night, in a place designed to break her, that what she did with the space she had been given was her business. And she intended to do it properly. That is the lesson. What you build when no one is watching is the truest measure of your character. Not what you build when success is guaranteed. Not what you build when someone is applauding. What you build in the dark, alone, when the cold is real and the fire is small and nobody is coming to help. That is who you are. And the forward ledger, the final lesson. There is no single moment in which old debts are simply erased. There is only the decision to begin building the present large enough that the past, while never forgotten, stops being the largest thing in the room. You can open that ledger today, whatever castle you were handed, however cold the title, however empty the rooms, you can decide what to build in it. If this story gave you something today, a thought, a feeling, a reminder of a strength you had forgotten you possessed, tell us in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from. Tell us what you are building. Subscribe to Royal Lore. New stories every week. The quiet ones, the builders, the women in ruined castles who refuse to become ruins themselves. We will be here. So will you.